Fallout is a game that prides itself on its unique art style, and as a proxy of that idea, the architecture and buildings throughout the series. So from Art Deco to Gothic to the downright futuristic and googie. So in today's video, I thought it would be a really fun idea just to deconstruct the pre-war and bits of the post-war Los Angeles skyline as seen in the Fallout TV show. Now, the art direction that the folks at Amazon have made is a wonderful balance, in my opinion, from several styles throughout the series, including Art Deco, Gothic, the more sort of traditional styles you will see, and of course the sort of high-tech organic style which you do see in games like Fallout 4 and Fallout 76, which as a fan I can appreciate because they're not just doing one thing, they're kind of blending the styles together in a realistic sense. Because it is a TV show, you do have to have some leap of imagination, so to speak. So the first time we see the LA skyline is in the opening scene for episode 1, the end, so to speak, at the Fallout TV show. Now, folks, I don't mean to glaze here, but honestly, I just love what they've done in the opening scene here. It's just a beautiful mix of different styles. Now, obviously, the VFX just has to be commended by itself. I will have a link to their art stations in the description below, so make sure to check those guys out. But before we go into the analysis and the sort of deconstruction of these buildings, we need a quick backstory on LA in the Fallout timeline. I think it's sort of prudent that we give a background to Los Angeles in the Fallout TV show because a lot of people won't really realize the history or why it's so big or why it looks like the way it is in the Fallout TV show, because of course we are revisiting this from Fallout 1. Now, from what I could gather, Los Angeles in this timeline is one of the biggest cities in America. So, from the looks of it, there seems to be height restrictions for many of the buildings in the background. So, often these are of uniform length, which may explain how Los Angeles became so big in the Fallout timeline. You know, if you can't go up, you go out in that way, with at least 3 city centers being seen in the opening roll, 2 of which just get absolutely vaporized. So, you only see the last one in the post-war episodes, you know, when they're looking at the craters and so on. Now, Los Angeles was home to one of the biggest corporations in America. You know them, you hate them. It is, of course, Vault-Tec. Now, it isn't implied that Vault-Tec have their main corporation headquarters in Los Angeles, but it is essentially implied from the pre-war flashbacks that we do see, kind of retconning the original image we see in Fallout 2, I believe, of the Vault-Tec headquarters in Los Angeles, showing a much more industrial city rather than the sort of gleaming retro future metropolis that we do see in the Fallout TV show. So one more thing, folks, Los Angeles was one of the most heavily targeted cities in America. Well, that probably coincides with it being the biggest city in America, at least by that point. So there was not 1, there was not 2, there was not 3, there was 4 detonations on Los Angeles itself. Now, this is just insane. Knowing Fallout, there's probably some secret military installations beneath the city. I would not be surprised, given Fallout's universe. But with the preliminary background of the city underway, I think it's time to deconstruct this amazing skyline. So the idea with this is that we're going to find the closest buildings and then kind of go further out, because it is quite hard to decipher some of the shapes of these unless they are like really sort of eloquently designed and so on. So this first building is perhaps by my eye one of the tallest buildings in Los Angeles, and I think survives the initial nuclear blast. The one next to it doesn't fare so well. Now, this skyscraper is a wonderful mix of mid-century influences which finish on this very retro bubble top at its height, which makes this building at least a very aesthetically thought out design. Now, one thing about the skyscraper is that in the opening scene, it takes a beating. This has to be one of the most sturdiest skyscrapers I've ever seen. Now, in this scene, we can see Cooper Howard escaping with his daughter on horseback, and in the background, we see the building next to it absolutely just collapsing underneath its own weight. But the building itself, it's fine. You know, the windows are blown out, but it seems to be completely sturdy, which is just bonkers. Now, one explanation from this doesn't actually come from the games itself, but in fact, the art book for Fallout 4. Now, for those in the know, the art book of Fallout 4 is the primary sort of origin we get for these sort of high-tech styles we see in Fallout 4, you know, like the mass fusion building, buildings like of that style, and of course seen in Fallout 76. Now, I've actually got the book, The Art of Fallout 4, so I'm going to read you directly from the book itself. So in the book, it talks about space-age materials. Now, I think this is really important when looking at the buildings, because I think newer buildings will have more resistant, more space-age sort of concrete mixes. You know, think Roman concrete, for example. Now, this is really important to think about, because if we're thinking about 2070s, you know, if Vault-Tec can make these modular, nuclear, bomb-proof shelters, then it's safe to assume that some of that technology has gone into some of the newer buildings we see in Los Angeles' skyline. Now, this is the best logical reason I could find that fits within the Fallout lore. If anyone has any better reasons why this building didn't collapse immediately, then I am open to suggestions. Now, the next building is to our right of the one previously said about and is in opening view of the, well, opening shot at the start of episode 1. Now, it's quite hard to decipher what this building may be, but we can hazard a few guesses. At a glance though, this building has some beautiful mid-century and definitely Art Deco influences, especially with those wonderful windows we see at the front, and it really stands out in the skyline, at least from the view of the Hollywood Hills. Now, at a best guess, I can figure out that maybe this building is some kind of civic center, or at least some kind of transit center. We do see a highway very close to this building, so it may be some kind of transportation hub for maybe a monorail or a highway, or maybe even the subway system beneath the City of Angels. But if I had to use my hunch, this more screams a civic center to me. You know, it's beautifully made. It's in the sort of height restriction zone that we do see outside of the skyscraper zones. So this kind of feels to me like a big civic center, maybe for Vault-Tec or some other corporations, you know, to show off their wares. But of course, that is a big guess. A lot of this is just fun and what I think is the most logical. But please say what you think this building is in the comment section below. Moving on from our potential civic center, we have to move over to the sort of secondary city center we see at the end of the opening. Now, we only see a glimpse of it before it is literally just vaporized, glassed beyond comprehension by the final atomic device, with just after that the screen going black. But even with a snapshot, we can see some really interesting building designs, whether that be high-tech or Art Deco. Now, the first building I want to look at is this one here, which employs a highly future tech appearance and is wholly reminiscent of skyscrapers we see, you know, in downtown Boston in Fallout 4 or in Charleston or Watoga in Fallout 76. So by far, this has to be one of the more interesting building designs I've seen in the skyline. Now, of course, I do love the first skyscraper. It has a wonderful mid-century Art Deco theme, but this one is wholly high-tech. We have this beautiful reverse cone shape with the bubble top, and almost like these elevator shafts that go into the sort of top section of the building itself. You know, it reminds me of the mass fusion building with the sort of a glass dome elevator you see in the middle of the skyscraper. Now, this building is in the sort of a secondary skyscraper zone in Los Angeles that we do see. So I can imagine that this is most likely some kind of fancy schmancy office building, maybe some kind of like corporate advertising agency or something like that. It's very different from these sort of more minimalist skyscrapers we do see, which of course is a more mid-century style, but obviously with a few retro kicks. But this one really stands out, so it kind of gives me the idea that this is more of a affluent or opulent corporate building, maybe for a more design-oriented profession. Now, of course, it wouldn't be Los Angeles without the Griffith Observatory standing in the background. It's such a contrast between these older Art Deco styles and the high-tech. It really makes a good mix. Obviously, they do talk about in the Art of Fallout 4, which I'm really glad they've shown here. Now, the next building I want to talk about is one I like to call the Temple. And the reason for that is when you see it, it's almost built with an Egyptian blend of Art Deco and Gothic styles, which does stand out alongside it being one of the sort of peppering of small to medium-sized skyscrapers you see just hugging the Hollywood Hills outside of the three major zones we see in the opening. Now, the reason I call it the Temple is that it has this incredibly smooth run-up from the side. It's an angled skyscraper with this sort of these gargoyles on top, which is why I say it has the Gothic influences. But it has this beautiful sort of monolith quality to it, which really does make it stand out in my opinion. And of course, next to it, we do see sort of similarly designed buildings. One has a sort of more classically designed bubble canopy. It has a sort of steel beam appearance to it rather than these sort of metal domes we see on other buildings. Now, this building's design may be a nod to Hollywood's or really Los Angeles's acceptance of unique and often foreign interpreted designs in the sort of 50s and 60s, especially from ancient world inspirations, you know, like Greece, Egypt, Rome, those kind of things. And now obviously this is part of a sort of a gimmicky facade you do see in the mid-century, so maybe that's part of the inspiration for these buildings, but really, who's to say? Again, I do just want to clarify, this is just my opinion. A lot of this is just interpretation and opinion. So if you have a different opinion than mine, that is completely fine. And please say it in the comment section below. Here we go, getting closer to the city center proper. So we see a few Art Deco skyscrapers that are a little hard to see, but there is one or two designs that really made me raise an appreciative eye to. Now, the first design I found is the one I have decidedly called the hood ornament, because it literally looks like a 50s car ornament was just turned into a building, and I just love that. It's so Jetsons in that way, you know, using these abstract shapes and the materials of the future to make these designs. It's really interesting the interpretation the design studio has made in making these buildings. The second skyscraper mentioned is lovingly called the Russian rocket, because it reminds me kind of the rocket you see in the Zombies map Ascension, but that's neither here nor there. Overall, this building is very reminiscent of the building we see in the pit from Fallout 3, you know, Ash's Palace, which I think is quite a nice nod, even if it isn't really meant to be, as well as mixing some older styles that we do see, you know, just to make it a bit more believable that the world does really exist, and it's, you know, more believable than, let's say, Watoga, which is a Rapture style city in the Cranberry Bog, which, you know, the lore does explain, but it's a bit hard to make these cities from scratch and just look like these cities of the future, rather than this sort of metropolis that has grown out after hundreds of years. And so, there we have it, my deconstruction of the Los Angeles timeline from the Fallout TV show. Honestly, I've been trying to make this video for a while, but I just haven't had the time to make it. But I have had the time now, so if you do like what I do, please like this video and subscribe. Honestly, I can't wait to see the second season of the Fallout TV show. Hopefully it's a banger. So I want to say thank you for watching the video. My name has been Dr. Wasabi. I bid you a most pleasant good morning, good evening, or good night. And of course, as always, God bless.